So this is my 2026 senior internship experience. I know a lot of you have heard about it. I'm very excited. This is about me. I'm my name is Clea. I'm a sociology major without a minor, graduating in May. I'm interested in criminology and criminal justice. Those are not the same thing. And I want to take a gap year before I get my master's degree to further navigate my future and what I want in my career. Things are a little muddled right now. But my goal in life is to help people in any way I possibly can. But my career goal is to help people who come in contact with the justice. So my internship was with the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services. I got the internship. I literally just went online and I looked up Maryland government jobs. And then I went through a list and I said, it would be really interesting if I could do the juvenile services. So the process to, I didn't do much to get the internship. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't have to do any LinkedIn or anything. I just had to fill out the form and add my resume. And they got back to me months later. So the Department of Juvenile Services is an executive agency and it's cabinet level department. It was established in 1967, but the name didn't really come in until 1989. It went through many evolutions. If you know about like criminal justice, you know about like houses of refuge and reform schools. So Maryland had about 4 original houses of refuge that are now kind of turned into detention facilities for youth. And there's about 12 in the state, I think, and 4 are currently not open. So the department originally like primarily provided like facility care, but now they have turned into a more rehabilitative department and they do service delivery system, which gives like facilities and treatments, but in the community instead of in facilities, but they still do provide service in facilities, but they're secure for more serious offenses. The goals and the purpose of DJS is to create treatment plans, manage, keep safe, and oversee juveniles who come in contact and encounter the Maryland juvenile system. They want to successfully rehabilitate these youth and keep them out of adult jail and prisons, while also holding them accountable for their actions. So we're not a punitive abusive system or rehabilitated. And they want to lower the recidivism rate when it comes to these youth, supposedly. And they also support community programs in hopes of preventing delinquent acts by juveniles before the state needs to actually intervene. So they support things like therapy, family therapy, mental health screenings, evaluations, things like that. And then there's different branches of the DJS: intake, juvenile court or adjudication, detention, treatment, and community detention. So I primarily worked in intake. I did 2 different branches of intake. I did one in Annapolis and one in Upper Marlboro, which is Prince George's County. I primarily did Annapolis, though, on Wednesdays. And I also did get to go to juvenile court in Prince George's County at the Upper Marlboro District Court. There were some days where I sat in for about like 20 minutes of court trials, and one time I sat in there for 3 hours. And I also did get to sit in on some of the community detention treatments, which I would get to. But here's one of them. So my typical day, it varied. I worked on site 3 days out of the week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Wednesdays were my most consistent days. I went to Annapolis intake office, like I said earlier. And I worked there from about like 9 to, on a typical day, 9 to 3, but sometimes I was there 8 hours. And here I did a lot of reading of police reports and I wrote many narratives. I started off with a college notebook and it was probably 4 pages left by the time I was done my internship. I sat on many hearings. They're called intake hearings. They're informal and they're not court. I want to establish they're not court and they cannot have the juveniles arrested. And I took notes on those. I called victims for victim impact statements and I scheduled hearings with parents and guardians for their intake hearings. Mondays and Fridays were not consistent. I actually only saw my supervisor probably about 4 times this entire process. She works at the Largo office, but I was just never there really. I was either Upper Marlboro or Annapolis. And sometimes when I went to Upper Marlboro, the district court, I sat in juvenile court every now and then. It does get kind of confusing because the language in juvenile court is different from criminal justice. So if you watch a lot of CSI and judge shows, you have no idea what they're talking about. I witnessed their intake processes. I got to compare them to Annapolis, and I also witnessed juveniles being placed on GPS or CDM. GPSing and CDM are can be given after like basically you get adjudicated and then the disposition hearing, and they're like, oh, this is what we're going to do. You could be placed, well, not you guys, but juveniles may be placed on GPSing, which is basically a less strict version of CDM, which is basically house arrest, but if you do on GPSing, you get to go to school, and you normally have a curfew and a realm of places you can go in like an area. But if you leave the area, then your case manager will probably call you. And CDM is the stricter version, is community detention electronic monitoring, which means you need to go to school and go right back home. And if you're not home, you're AWOL, and we're gonna find you. I was also able to do 1 day of probation at the Largo office where I shadowed a case manager and we visited juveniles on probation. The juveniles on probation, they called the case managers their PO, but that is not, she very strictly told me that is not her title. We visited 5 juveniles in all. We went to 2 different schools and shot in the youth facility, which is juvie. So I thought it was really interesting to witness them, and well, I didn't speak to them. This was earlier in my internship, so I was still, shadowing, pretty quiet. It was different though. I will say one of the juveniles, I had seen his court trial, and you get like a preconceived notion, I think, when you sit in court and you're like, why is he being detained right now? And then you meet him and you're like, oh, he's like mostly like every other kid. One thing I also didn't put on here is I did get to call people one day, parents whose juveniles were on probation. Well, it's more like unsupervised informal supervision. So they didn't go to court, but they are on pre-court trial because of something they did. And instead of being let off with a warning, that's what they got. And I got to call them and check up on them. So I thought that was really interesting. Speaking to the parents is always interesting. My successes, one of them is speaking to the parents, providing some comfort, because whenever I would make those scheduled hearings, a lot of the parents weren't even aware that their kid was under like the charges. They were like, they're being charged. And I'm like, not yet. You have to come in and we have to do this informal hearing, and then your decision, the intake officer makes the decision, and there's 3 different, you could either be placed on informal supervision, you could be sent to court or the state's attorney's office, as they say, or you could just get off in the morning. So it was really interesting to talk to the parents and provide some comfort, to let them know like your child's not going to jail. Possibly. And then I was also able to communicate with some of the juveniles and offer my input and give them a little bit of advice, because I'm at an age where they don't completely see me as old. I will say they do see me as older, but I was like, yeah, I was your age not even that long ago. Like I was 16 once, I remember. And some of them do just make simple mistakes when it comes to being around the wrong crowd. I also got to complete an intake decision form and a D-Ray. Here you guys go. I got you a paper. You pass it around. This is the intake decision form that I was able to bring home, and you guys can read it. Everything's electronic though, so I have the paper version. You would sit in your intake office or your intake hearing, and you fill it out on like a Google Doc, and then you'll take that and fill out the actual form in the system. And then I also did a D-Ray, which is the detention risk assessment instrument, which kind of just gives you like a scale of what is the rate of the juveniles recidivism. Like, should they be in the community? Should they not? I will say they don't really use these to make their decisions. They kind of just fill them out. So when I did the D-Ray, I was like, oh, like now are you gonna do this? She was like, probably not. I was like, oh, okay. And then I provided the intake officers with my narratives, and they said I made their work so much easier because writing a narrative is basically writing like a summary of the police report. And the police reports are kind of all over the place most of the time. They don't focus on juveniles specifically, but like everything that's going on. So when I write my narratives, I have to focus on the juveniles whose case it is, and it makes their jobs easier because they just put it in. Okay, so my intellectual growth and like my thoughts in a sociological perspective, the system is very racist and bit classist. Black and brown children are disproportionately represented in the system. I was seeing way more Hispanic kids and Black kids, and really a lot of Black young boys and girls than any other race. And mind you, I will say like I'm not from Prince George's County. I don't know the demographic there, but I'm pretty sure there's still more white people than I was like expecting. But I didn't see a single white juvenile when I was down there. I saw a few at Annapolis, but not many. And there are times where I would read like police reports, and a lot of the white kids were getting away with things that the Black kids were also doing and not getting away with at all. Um, so from a sociological perspective, it was like I know the system and it was built on racism and everything, but to see it so up close and personal, I was just so shocked. And I think that's why partially why a lot of the people that work in there are like Black women. Because I think they all go into this job attempting to help people. Because I was told that everyone in this job has their own story, and you don't really go into this job without having some sort of connection. And I, from firsthand, can see that they're trying to help, but it's so hard to help when the policies you can't change them, and a lot of like the system is just like stuck the way it is because it's been like this for so long. And there were times where I was just so stressed out and upset about what was going on. And it's not like it's not visible. They're noticing it, I'm noticing it. I've only been here for a month and a half. But there was just like nothing they said they could do. And I even asked my supervisor at Annapolis, I was like, oh, like if you could change it, would you? And she said she absolutely would. So that was a lot on the mental. And then the peer influence, I have been taking juvenile delinquency with Dr. Schoenberger. So a lot of the things on here were things that I was learning at the same time I was doing my internship. So yes, juveniles make terrible decisions. Honestly, they're not good at decision making. They do not have good rational choices. Like they just don't weigh things. And when it comes to their peers, oh, they're like, if my friend jumped off this bridge right now, I'm going right behind them. They want to be cool. They want to fit in. And everyone at some point was like that, but we may not have done some of the things to that extent. But also, I've been noticing a lot of the parental supervision and involvement are like key factors. A lot of the parents are not as present as they want to be. Like there's definitely a problem with like single mothers and not being able to have the time to spend with their children. So their kids have a lot more free time, and they have open hands and they just get into things that they don't need to be getting into. But at the same time, some parents are just completely not there, and they were just times where I was in an intake with the parents and the kids, and the parents were just a little bit not present there. And I don't know if they have their own things going on. I don't want to make assumptions, of course, but there was times where I was like, gotta be there a little more for your kids. And we told them that. But can't control everything that goes on. Another thing I've been noticing is the education system is failing terribly. It adds to the school to prison pipeline. The education system brings out a lot of the kids that come in cannot read or write. They can't sign their name. They can barely read the signature part under the line. It's really upsetting, but I know it's not their fault because they're being pushed through school and graduated with like a first grade reading level. But at the same time, sometimes there was like Hispanic kids who came in who didn't speak much English, and they told this to the school, and the school did not offer any help or anything to help them understand more or even just like aid them. And then we would ask like, oh, the parents, like, did you try? But really not much use because their parents also didn't speak much English. So they said they would go to the school and the school they wouldn't treat them fairly. And on a wider perspective, sometimes when a lot of Hispanic families came in, especially if it was just like a petty offense or status offense, we would give them a warning and then they would cry. And my supervisor one time was like, "Do you understand like why they're so happy that we're letting them off?" And my me and my other intern were like what's going on? She was like, wide perspective, like realistically, if they got in trouble with the court system, there's a good chance they would be deported with Trump's administration. Many people of color actually were terrified. Like they would come, even if they brought their juveniles into the system for help. Like sometimes we do a child in need of supervision or assistance where the parents can ask for help. But sometimes they would come and they'd still like express how much they don't trust the system. And we'd be like, we're not the feds, like it's okay. We will try our best to help you. But no, it was I understand being scared of the system and not trusting it. So it was nice that I feel like the people that work there look like them. Like it's just full of Black women. And we were like, we understand what you're going through. Let us help you. This will not hurt you. So I think that was also really important. But no, it was a lot. They were terrified that something bad was going to happen to them. More officers are in schools or school resource officers than guidance counselors or social workers. So that was another thing I've been realizing is that instead of having like mental health helpers or guidance counselors, there's just officers. And they're at these public schools, and these public schools are mostly low income communities and low income people with not much money, also a lot of Black and brown students. And instead of even having like mediations and things, they just send them right to the system. They don't even try. Like they don't ask what's going on at home. They don't do any of that. They just send them right into the system. And I've been getting a lot of things from older Black women, especially that told that they're like, when I was younger, like it wasn't like this. Like we had fights and then we would have a mediation or we would not be sent to intake or the police wouldn't be there. Like that's what they said. Like times have really changed. So a lot of these kids are not getting off at all. And also I've been noticing the decision makers. Higher up is they look nothing like me. They don't look anything like me. There's a lot of white men, a lot of white people, and they're making like the big decisions. But also when it comes to making decisions, like during the entire intake process, there's decisions that are being made, and one decision could lead you to court, and then that could lead you to juvenile facility security. It could really end up on your record, and then before you know it, you're being waived to adult court, and before you know it, you're in jail. And I don't know, some of the decision makers may not be making the best decisions or decisions in their best, like out of their the kindness of their hearts. Um, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that, and that's what my project is somewhat about. When they make these decisions, have we done any like background research? Do they? I know everyone has cognitive biases without even knowing. Like, how are we combating that when it comes to judges putting people in prison, especially when it comes to waiving juveniles to adult, because disproportionately Black boys make up a lot of those cases, 70%. Um, my personal growth though, I've definitely learned a lot more about my emotional intelligence. I've been told multiple times I am super empathetic. They say I wear my heart on my sleeve. I've always been like an extroverted, outgoing person. But I didn't think I was that empathetic. Like I didn't think I was to the point where they were like, this could be your downfall. But some people are saying it's my strength now. I think when you do a job like this, you absolutely need to have some empathy because going into this with like a stone heart is not gonna like you're not helping these kids. And also the deeper level of understanding. A lot of people, when I tell them this is my internship, they hit me with when I was younger, I would never do that or whatever. but they don't understand that they have a completely different background than these kids. They have no idea what's going on in these kids' lives. Like just simple things at home with your parents being abusive or not abusive or around or not around will definitely cause some different choices to be made. And they don't understand that sometimes. I have better discernment. A lot of these kids do lie. They will sit in your face and lie, and most of them are not good at it. So it was interesting, and I think I've learned how to detect lying just a tiny bit better because if you ask someone a question and then you turn the question around, it's the same question, but they'll answer completely different. So I will say sometimes that was a little funny going through maybe like an intake hearing and they were like, I said this, and then they changed it and you're like, you just said this. So yeah, that was fun to witness. I did some problem solving. Sometimes things were a little harder for me because this internship doesn't give you like computer or anything. You don't have a login. So I'm doing everything by hand. And if I'm scheduling things, I don't have the schedule. So I'm trying to figure out how to reschedule it if it doesn't work for the intake officer without actually having anything in front of me but like a pen and paper. But I figured out how to deal with that. So I did a lot of problem solving. There's a lot of problems. And then self-advocacy. So originally when I was, getting my placement, I had to self-advocate a lot because I feel like they forgot about me. And I was like learning how to speak in a more professional but like sterner tone because I had to be professional, but at the same time, I wasn't just gonna let them be like, oh, you're just an intern. Like, no, like I signed up, I need this. So I had to do a lot of self-advocacy with the original people that were giving me my placement. And at the same time, I did some with like my boss, because if like there was something I wasn't comfortable doing, I would let her know. And also if like they wanted me to come in on a certain day, I was like, oh no, my spring break. So I got to do that and better decision making. I think going into this, like I said I read a lot of police reports, and you can absolutely have a preconceived notion when it comes to those police reports. Like sometimes you read them like, whoa, you're guilty. No, it's a little different. I One thing I did, like if I were calling the juvenile parents or the victims, I wouldn't read the police report yet until after, and then I still don't take them fully as they are because first of all, the police reports sometimes were absolutely inaccurate, and then also juveniles come in, they share their side of the story, and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. So I kind of you have to see from both sides. I've been told there's at least three sides to every story. It could have been the juvenile, it could have been the witness, and it could have been the actual story. So you never know. And then I've been looking at things at a wider scale. I think being there and seeing all these different people with very different backgrounds and just like doing things that I've never done, but understanding where they're coming from and just looking at the wide scale of what's going on in the world and then everything going on in like the education system in their communities. You can't help but look at it because at the end of the day, like these are just kids. And it most of the time it really does suck what they're going through, even if they committed a crime, you're just wondering like what happened? Like what happened in your childhood? And most of the time, at least like 90%, there was something that was going on. Then I did a lot of networking. They love me there. So my research, I mentioned before, I'm doing it on the waiving of juveniles to adult court. It's been called many different things. I did my last day, I got to read some transfer of jurisdictions, which I learned they also call them. So basically, sometimes a juvenile will commit a crime that at a certain age and certain crimes will get them sent automatically to adult court. But sometimes the state's attorney decides that they just want the juvenile to face time in adult court. And that would be a waiver. That's a decision in itself. And it's a judicially controlled transfer. So a judge has to sit and like hear the case and be like, oh yes, this should be adult, or no, it does not. Like I said earlier, Black boys are predominantly these cases. They are about 70%, and they do make up a high population of the juvenile system. So the judge will make this decision, and if this decision is made, once the juvenile is waived into adult court, literally no matter what age, any future offenses will be held in adult court. And kids that go to adult court or waive to adult court have higher recidivism rates than kids that are handled in the juvenile. So at the end of the day, this is not helpful to anyone. The kids are being waived, and then anything, even if it's just like petty theft, they're going to adult court. This is not helpful. It's not helping the community. It's not helping the kids. It's actually really bad. It's terrible to think about. And at the end of the day, we, once again, know the system is not built to necessarily help people, but to harm them, certain marginalized groups. And that's exactly what it's doing. So I was just like, this justice? Are these decisions fair? Who's making these decisions? It's really sad. Oh, it didn't work.
Was there an effect?
There was an effect. I didn't even realize all my animation messed up. So this is me on my last day. They brought me pastries and balloons and stuff. And it was also just my birthday like the week before. This is me reading my TOJs, by the way. I was literally reading transfer of jurisdictions when they did this. Scared the crap out of me. And the other intern took this picture. And she was doing all the stuff that I normally do. But thank you guys for listening. Any questions?
For that document that you showed us, did you think it, like, as we're taking that juvenile delinquency class, do you think it was weird scoring things sometimes, knowing like that felt like a study guide, like for a test we had? Like, did you think that was weird scoring people based off of
it does things? Well, it does sometimes, but at the same time, the questions are made in a way that it's supposed to like see how high like your score is.
Yeah.
This is your recidivism rate or your rate of committing another offense. And I don't know, as I was reading it, I was like, this just sounds like school.
Yeah.
Like we learn about the age, we learn about your peers, you learn about school. And I would say it makes sense when you're sitting in there and you're like, oh, you don't have any strong relationships with us outside of your family. And that's kind of dangerous because if something is happening in the home, you don't have anyone to go to.
Yeah.
And if you have friends who are more negative, then you are more likely to do like I will say like peer pressure is so real when it comes to these kids. Like they will do things just because they want to fit in. So I mean, it is weird looking at it and comparing it to juvenile delinquency. Like I will say, I was like, oh my gosh, this just feels like school again. But it makes sense when you're in there, like hands-on doing it.
I saw on the form there was a question about if the child was enrolled in a special education program.
Mm-hmm.
I did a research project on that last year and like just about the unequal treatment and disciplinary action in schools against kids with special needs based on race. And obviously the conclusion was a lot of Black male students enrolled in programs like that are often, you know, moved further along in the process of like either being sent to trial, sent to jury, whatever. What, like, did you notice any of that within the system? And like, can you share a story?
Yes, actually, it felt like a lot of the kids actually have like IEPs and 504 plans. It was quite common. I didn't know what it was at first. So I had to do my research to learn that it was happening a lot. And when it came to like how common it was at least like every other kid, it felt like, and it was primarily like young Black men. They didn't know. They were put in. A lot of the parents were like, yeah. It would really stem from them going like, oh yeah, we got him diagnosed with ADHD and then they gave him the core program, or sometimes every now and then they'd say he's no longer in it, but then the intake officer would be like, well, he should be. But a lot of the parents didn't want them in there, which I thought was interesting because some of them did need it, I will say, and it would have been more helpful. But a lot of them just kind of stopped going to school, so I can't really say if it helped or not because most of them had a lot of truancy. Whoever was first.
I know when you were talking about the public school crisis, because I know that's a big thing here in Baltimore,
Yeah.
like, especially for, like, my little brother, he's going to private school for high school now. Because the public schools here just aren't doing what they need to do at all. So when you were doing these intakes, did you ever have any juveniles that were from like private schools or like charter or anything, or was it majority public?
A majority was public. I will say it was not only public, but there was also a lot of alternative schools as well. So some of them were not on their first offense and they had already started going to alternative schools to help them because a lot of them were behind and those schools were supposed to help them, or like traditional schools, I think they're called as well. Um, I don't recall seeing any like private charters. I think that the only, yeah, no, I actually don't think I saw any. The closest was like one girl who came in and her case was weird because she went to the casino with her friends. And that was about it. But other than that, there was nothing interesting. Like there was no private schools that I saw. It was a lot of, and I know a lot of the schools in Annapolis. So I was like, I know the school and most of them are public. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I skipped Carlos.
Okay, sure. I know that you mentioned that the rules and stuff and the regulations were very rigid. Was there any like points where you could exercise your own discretion for decisions?
I was allowed to put my input in, like if I sat through an intake hearing and then they left, I was allowed to put my input into the intake officer, but I didn't make any like decisions like strongly. I just was able to voice my opinion, but you know, realistically, I'm not qualified to do that. They weren't gonna let me. Oh,
I was asking about like, the types of offenses that people were coming in with and how you saw that broken down, by like socioeconomic.
okay, so I in oh gosh, where was I at? Prince George's County or Upper Marlboro, a lot of those offenses were a lot more violent because it's connected directly to the district court. So when I had kids come in there, sometimes it was either for an intake or they were being put on like what I said, the CBEM or GBS, I'm sorry. And I will say that was a lot. There was way more young Black kids there than white or even Hispanic. There was I really only saw Black children when I was there. And one thing I noticed is like one big thing the parents were saying was like, oh, we're not even in the city. Like, I don't know why. That got me every time. Because they were always like, we're not even in the city. Like Prince George's County isn't like a city place, it's the suburbs. So I don't understand why all this crime is going on. But they didn't understand like their community is failing. Like it was literally going downhill. Prince George's County is, no offense to them, but they are going downhill very quickly. And their education system is not doing well. And there's a lot more crime happening out there because the kids are getting online and they're saying things and they're coming together. So from a like a sociological like perspective, being in Prince George's County, it felt like, first of all, it felt like a lot more of the low income community was moving in, and it felt like that was causing a problem because then like the white people are moving out and they're going to their charter schools and they're going to their private schools. So the school's like huge, it's overpopulated. They're not really doing much to educate the kids. And all of a sudden all this crime starts. And they're like, what's the problem? Like we just moved in. But it was bad. But with Annapolis, I will say the crimes there weren't nearly as violent. Like there was less violent crimes there. It was also not connected to a court, so I'll say that as well. I was seeing a lot more petty theft, a lot more maybe like the worst I saw was like aggravated, not aggravated, it was second degree assault. And also I saw a few like malicious destruction. I'll say the worst crime was the malicious destruction, but not because of the crime itself, but because of what he did. And that was probably the most violent one. He didn't necessarily hurt anyone like physically, but it definitely could have been like attempted murder. So I will say that he was white and he got away with it. So yeah, that was one thing that I noticed. I was like, well, yeah, so I don't know. It was very different, like the types of crime, seeing like who was coming in for what and comparing the two places. I'm really glad actually and thankful that they let me go to both because I was able to compare the difference from like a class and like race point of view. Because on one hand, I'm at Annapolis and the daughter's coming in just for the casino and her dad's offering me to go to a boat club. I'm like, why are you trying to buy me out? I don't want to go to a boat club. And on the other hand, I'm seeing like a lot of low income and single moms coming in and their kids have like stabbed someone. So I was like, I would say that was an interesting contrast, but also still upsetting to see because like on the other hand, I am Black. Like I was really upset to see a lot of the Black community coming in with such like horrific violent things going on. Like I saw there's a lot of violence on the other side.